Okay, we are ready to do our second block for the Block of the Week quilt this summer, and the block this week is called Wheels. And we will start off by first taking our 7 1/4 inch squares of background and dark and layering those right sides together and then cutting an X corner to corner to give us 4 triangles. Then we're going to take those, and it's important that you leave the background on top and that you are sewing from the 90-degree angle down to the point on each one, and once we stitch those we will have a larger triangle. So let me go ahead and do it. Okay, so I've sewn my triangles, but one thing I want to show you is in the pressing part I'm using a product called a Steady Betty. The nice thing about Steady Betty is it doesn't move around and your fabric doesn't move around when it's being pressed. So I'm going to set that there and I'm going to press, and it keeps your triangular pieces perpendicular to each other. When you're doing a triangle square, it keeps it square. If you're doing a strip set, it keeps that strip set straight. So once we get done with this, we'll be taking the triangles cut from the 6 7/8 inch squares, and we're going to be sewing those onto these triangles. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so now we have our square. Perfect rolled measurement on this is 6 1/2 inches once you get it sewn to this point. Then the next thing we'll do is take our 3 1/2 inch squares, and last week we talked about matching grain line to grain line. So again, if I pull on this, that's my lengthwise grain, and I have lengthwise grain there. And I'm going to put my square on the corner here, and again I will take my folded corner clipper and I'm going to match my 3 1/2 inch line to the outside edge here, and I will trim. And this already has a 1/4 inch line marked on it. It gives me my 1/4 inch seam line, and I'm going to sew on that edge. And again, I want to be sure I'm matching grain line to grain line. If you do that, you won't have as much problem with the fabrics scooting against each other and not being square when you get done stitching. Okay, so let me go ahead and sew these two. And okay, now that we've sewn these, we'll cut them apart, and then we'll be pressing the seam allowance towards the smaller triangle using our Steady Betty. Notice how things really don't scoot on that. And then when we get done with this, again, it still should measure 6 1/2 inches. And then we have our 4 quadrants that we need to sew together. And we'll have a pinwheel effect in the center with this and with this. I'm going to sew these 4 quadrants together, and then I'm going to show you how to spin the center so that it will lay flatter and not be as bulky in there. So I'll put these right sides together. My seam allowances will oppose each other there in the center, and we'll sew the block. Then I'm going to take these and lay them out, and we'll fold it in half. And you'll notice the seam allowances are going this way, so I want to press this one up, the other one down, so that they're all spinning in the same direction. Okay, now this is my test, always to see if I'm having a sewing day or a non-sewing day, because you know you do have those. And if my center comes out, and it did, I'm having a sewing day and I should go home and do more of this. So, right now if I press to one side, it's really bulky right here in the center. So I want to eliminate as much bulk as I possibly can. You'll notice that everything is spinning in the same direction until I get right here, and this guy's going in the opposite direction. So what I want to do, you'll notice here on this seam I have about 3 stitches that are sitting above my perpendicular. So I'm going to take these guys and rip them out, and take my little stitch that was holding the 2 together. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And what that does for me is it lets me press one seam up and one seam down, so that now they twirl and this center will lay nice and flat. And I'll press it, have one up, one down, and in a perfect world, this again is a 12.5 inch block. And we'll see you next week.